Okay, guys, we got to talk about a pretty crazy story here because now Jamestown is about to default on $93 million worth of loans tied to two San Francisco office buildings. Not great news, right? Because nowadays, office buildings like these, even very well kept ones, good looking ones, high end ones, in good locations, nobody wants them, right? And San Francisco's office market is just so bad to the point that even places like Hong Kong, where a lot of companies have already left, or like Singapore, there's no way as bad as San Francisco. Like Hong Kong, vacancy rates 15%. Manhattan's pretty bad. Vacancy rates are like 12 to 15. Right? Miami's very, very low. Even Seattle is like less than 17% vacancies. But San Francisco is heading towards 35% vacancy rates, with it probably heading towards 40% within 2 quarters because many of the offices being leased out are empty, right? They're empty because the leases don't end. They signed a contract, and many of these companies are just moving their employees out to places like Las Vegas, Austin, and Miami. So get ready for even crazier vacancies. In fact, vacancies are so high, they've even canceled 2 massive skyscraper projects in San Francisco because investors told them, why would we invest in this new skyscraper office when we could just buy some defaulted ones? That's some scary stuff, if you ask me. So Jamestown, 2 really good looking buildings. These are not bad buildings by any means. These are, in fact, in my opinion, very high end, well kept, lovely looking buildings, which now the market just doesn't want. All right. And a lot of the places of these offices are actually in very good locations, very close to the Salesforce Tower, very close to downtown. This is kind of like where most of the office workers hang out and start working. So what's happening is the investor is trying to talk with the lender to keep at least one out of the 2 buildings, but it's going to be very difficult, especially if trying to find any sort of tenants right now is very hard. Now, don't be fooled by the news that AI companies are going to San Francisco and they're going to save the office real estate market. Yes, there is a AI company going to San Francisco. They rented a 400,000 square feet office. That's an incredible amount of space, but there's like tens of millions of empty office space. So you have hundreds of companies leaving and then you have one coming in. It's still a massive net loss for the office department. And it's getting worse, right? And the dude, hey, if you own these buildings and you try to sell it, good luck, because Wells Fargo sold it for a terrible price, which Wells Fargo is willing to take. Now, here's the thing. There's a lot of investors, small and big, in the office department of San Francisco because during the pandemic, so many people took out very cheap loans to buy office buildings because during that time, office vacancies were very high. And people are like, this is a smart decision. Everyone's going to come back to the office. Tech is only growing in the pandemic, so I'm sure office demand will probably exceed expectations after the pandemic. Well, now is after the pandemic, and look at what's happening. 150,000 office workers are no longer coming back. And this also partly has some blame on the city council themselves because pretty much San Francisco during the pandemic, when there's no office workers, just became a huge open air drug market. And now organized crime is basically thriving in San Francisco and Oakland. And I kind of see why many of the rich and also tech workers just don't want to work here anymore. Many companies are moving online and many companies are going to other places in the Bay Area or just leaving California in general, which the latter is more popular. So Wells Fargo sells San Francisco office tower at a $60 million loss. It's not about the $16 million loss is scary, but the place and time where Wells Fargo purchased the building. Number one, it's near the Trans-America Bay Pyramid Building, which is basically a massive tourist hotspot. This is a high-end area, and Wells Fargo's bought their building around this section, which is pretty nice of them, right? But they bought it for $108 million back in 2005. So you almost have 20 years of price appreciation, right? And now they sold it for $45 million. So they bought it almost 20 years ago at $300 per square foot. Now they sold it for $125 a square foot. That is something that I've never seen before, right? Even if you go to places like Manhattan, go to Hong Kong, go to Singapore, for example, if you buy commercial real estate in 2005, you're going to at least sell it for like plus 30, plus 40, plus 50% of what you paid for back like 2 decades ago. But San Francisco is a whole different animal. If you bought a building even back in like 2003 or like 2000 for a super cheap price, Now you're going to sell it for even cheaper, right? You do know that $100 million back in 2005 was worth so much more than it is now. Now with the crazy inflation going on, $100 million back in '05, that was just a lot of money back then. But now, of course, you do have this building absolutely taking a fat beating. And people are saying that some of these price decreases are worse than like 2008 or even like recessions. So we're going to be seeing a lot of these office buildings being sold for cheap. And it's not a good sign, especially even residential buildings are taking a massive hit. Initially, it was mostly office buildings, but now we're moving towards the residential sector with Nema, this San Francisco luxury apartment building, which charges about like $2,000-$3,000 for one bedroom, is now also facing the massive default market. If you check out Nema, this is actually a very good looking building. If you look around, it's right next to the X headquarters or Twitter. It's next to some Starbucks. It's next to Uber, Reddit, and other tech companies. And this is Nema, right? This is supposed to be fully rented out. Now they're super empty. They can't even pay for their everyday necessities. They can barely pay for the staff or the mortgage or the interest rates. And if you look around, you also see some pretty drastic stuff. Like, for example, this plot of land, which is right next to Nema, which is supposed to be built for a massive 47-story skyscraper named Hayes Point with 330,000 square feet of office space and condos and apartments alike on top. Well, they're canceling the project, land sent back to its lander because nobody wants to build this. Investors aren't giving them money. They're like, if we want to buy a residential building, we'll just wait for one of these to foreclose and buy it for like the super cheap price. So we're seeing this kind of attitude happening in San Francisco, which is really, really scary because a lot of these high-end buildings, they used to be very good. Complexes, condos, always filled out, right? When there's an open space, people are actually going for bidding wars. But now they're super empty, and it's very sad to see this kind of stuff, and developers are pretty freaked out. If you look at Seattle, they're still building skyscrapers, and those skyscrapers, surprisingly, are still being sold out, right? If you go to Manhattan, they're still building towers. Go to Miami, they're still building towers. Go to San Francisco, there's no towers. They stopped building some of the biggest projects, and that's very concerning, considering that San Francisco normally is always constructing, there's always renovation, there's always real estate transactions, but even the city is taking a massive financial loss by seeing real estate transfers being at an all-time low. Because the city makes $500 million to $700 million from commercial real estate and residential real estate transfer tax. Now they made $186 million. Talk about a massive decrease. And that number is only continuing getting lower because, like I said, a lot of these office employees, office workers, they're no longer coming back. And many landlords want to sell these buildings for a small loss, but they can't. They're going to have to sell it for a huge loss, like Wells Fargo, which some are not happy about. And they're still trying to scramble, do something about it. The city isn't lowering their property tax. Building inspection fees went up 15%. It's going to be a pretty scary hour situation for San Francisco and Oakland real estate. Not just office, but also residential as well.